watching these two complicated, powerful women in a dance of resemblances and a power dynamic, and watching all those things. So it was impossible to not be inspired by Bergman.
Wanted to start first, because this is the first thing I thought of when I saw the film, and then it was on your list, is Persona.
Yeah.
So how do you see your film having a conversation with Ingmar Bergman's film?
Well, just to even say your film has a conversation with Ingmar Bergman's film Persona is a tall order. But I couldn't not think of Persona when I first read Sammy's script, in the clear way that it's such a unique example of a film that pairs these two women and where likenesses are being exchanged, or that one character is learning about the likeness of the other and trying to incorporate it into her process as an actor. And in Persona, Liv Ullmann plays an actress who's been stricken with stage fright and has stopped speaking. And Bibi Andersson comes as a nurse and a caretaker to look after her. But I think Bergman's original instinct for the film, I think I read this somewhere, was an image, which is often the case. Sometimes that's happened for me before. Like, you just sort of get an image or a feeling, and that's where the whole movie kind of derives from. And for him, it was this image of these two attractive blonde women who resembled each other in matching straw hats out in the sun, comparing hands. And that shot figures into the film Persona, but it's not necessarily the shot you think of when we all think of Persona. It's more that ultimate shot where the two are almost playing as if they're in a mirror. Mm-hmm. And their gaze turns to the lens of the camera. It's coming out of sort of a dream that Bibi Andersson is having. And one of them sort of brushes the bangs of the hair from the other. And it's just, it's a moment where time stops in cinema. And there were opportunities in this movie to play with scenes in mirrors and to play with watching these two complicated, powerful women in a dance of resemblances and a power dynamic, and watching all those things. So it was impossible to not be inspired by Bergman.
Well, and you bring up mirror. You have a great scene that seems complementary as well, involving lips and lipstick in May December, as opposed to hands and hair. Did Persona influence that directly?
Persona did influence that scene directly. And there's also a movie, Face to Face, by Bergman, that I even think the poster is the two women in profile looking at each other, and I think they play with a Rorschach. But the scene becomes them speaking to each other in profile. But it begins and it's set up in the bathroom, where the lens of the camera is the mirror and is the reflection of each of the actresses of themselves. And so the scene ends where the two turn back to see the result of the makeup application that Julianne has just put on to Elizabeth. That's her own makeup style. And the conversation ends, but we know they're seeing each other when they're looking at us.
And so you mentioned that Liv Ullmann plays an actress in Persona, so let's stick with performance because that's a big part of your film. But the next one I want to get to is Norma Desmond.
Yeah.
In Sunset Boulevard.
I think one thing about Sunset Boulevard, which is just also a film that is just formative in so many ways, and even formative as noir. It's just such an extraordinary, even though it doesn't occupy the same topic and setting as crime-driven noir films do. It's the first film one thinks about when you think about a story of an older woman, younger man relationship. And when this script first came to me and it evoked our memories as a culture of Mary Kay Letourneau and how distinctive a story that was and how much that sort of dominated the tabloid landscape when it came out, it made me go, wait a minute. These stories about older women and younger men have been a through line in some of the most formative and influential films and most beautiful films ever made in Hollywood. And so Sunset Boulevard, and again, it's about acting, and it's about an actor, and it's about an aging actor. And so the actor side of the continuum is swapped in Sunset Boulevard because it's Natalie Portman who's the actor in our movie, who's the younger woman. But that alone just set in motion themes that have already been out there that I thought were like, that's the place to start in my preparation.
And the most famous line from that film, of course, is "I'm ready for my close-up." I wanted to ask about your use of close-ups in May December, specifically the pet shop scene when Natalie is acting out the seduction's isolated.
I already have an idea of what it must have felt like.
What felt like?
I was sneaking around with you.
They're selective. We start overhead on her at one end of the zoom. I used a lot of zooms in the film. The zoom is part of that language of the movie. In fact, the whole scene is just a series of zooms as we walk her into the corner where Gracie and Joe ostensibly had sex all those years ago. And then we start at the closest end of the zoom in an intimate close-up of her as she's imagining what it might be like to be in the thralls of this young man's arms and be in the throes of that experience. And we're slowly zooming out and kind of pulling her out of the spell that has been cast by her moment alone. And it's a moment where she has the freedom alone to really experience what the acting feels like.
We got to get into the music. So the next film we want to talk about is The Go-Between, which Michel Legrand's score. Do you use directly, or is it recreated?
It's all recreated and all rearranged and recorded by Marcelo Zarvas, my composer, and added to with original music and filled out. So it really became Marcelo's own score, but it uses the melodic signature from The Go-Between, which is a film that I had forgotten about, and which, while I was collecting more directly relevant sources and ideas and reference films for May December, The Go-Between was on Turner Classic Films, and I watched it, and I think I saw it when it came out when I was a kid. But it's a film that's sort of fallen out of sight and is not something you see crop up much, and so I hadn't seen it in so many years and I had forgotten so much about it. But the score asserts itself at the beginning of that movie with such force. An ominous sense of foreboding and puts you truly on the edge of your seat as a viewer, because the story is this sort of pastoral coming-of-age story set at the turn of the century of a boy who visits his rich friend's family for the summer and develops an infatuation with his older sister, Julie Christie. But the score makes you read every piece of the frame as the film unfolds, looking for clues as to where this film is leading and what's behind the manifest narrative that we get in the story, And that just was so exhilarating to me and thought could be so applicable to the experience of watching this film. I put in every cue that I thought music would play. This was really from Marcelo, but I was on the plane to pre-production to Savannah to begin pre-production. And I just spotted the whole film for where I thought music would play. And I laid in cues from The Go-Between. And this was basically a document I was creating for Marcelo to start getting the wheels of his mind, a brilliant mind, going as early as possible. But in the meantime, we just started to use the Go-Between cues in every single shot that we shot on set. And I first started to share the score with all my partners looking at the image book, but then on set, we were playing each cue and turning down the music for the dialogue recording and then turning it back up. So we were all inundated with this music. This music was how we experienced the shooting of the film, which I've never, done anything like before. And that informed so many things that followed the editing and ultimately my choice to try to really use that melodic aspect of Legrand's score.
That's amazing. Speaking of music, go to The Graduate, iconic pop music, of course. There, we're going to see in a lot of these films there is an age gap narrative. But what is your memory of the first time that you saw The Graduate, and how did that affect you?
Man, The Graduate was one of those films that I saw when I was young that literally I started to feel the pulse of creative desire as a filmmaker and when I watched it, because of the way the movie is shot, the choices about how that movie is visualized. The way The Graduate works is in, of course, the performances and the incredible script, but it's really owes so much the comedy and how the audience is thinking about what's going on off the frame and going on, and when is the next shot going to cut. The cuts have a suspenseful element to them, so they're part of the humor of how that film works. And it's true for Manhattan as well, where shots are allowed to play out and not move, and gorgeous compositions of Gordon Willis are setting the stage for this story about Manhattan contemporary social life and culture. It sets up a different kind of blocking that he usually uses in other films. These wide angle frames that are locked off inside apartment rooms where characters, Dan Keaton and Woody Allen, are having a conversation, and they keep leaving the frame and coming back in and going down the hallway and coming around the corner. And that slight distance is what gives it its humor. And if it was constantly cutting and covering every angle, it would have dissipated something really sharp and really observant about that film, and an entire tone that's conducted through the whole film. And that was inspiring to ideas about waiting for the cut and holding until you're kind of squirming in your seat in May, December.
And with those two films grouped together, I think now is the time, maybe could be a good time to talk about the phrase May, December, which I didn't even know prior to this film. So many of our people watching this might not. So what is May, December?
May, December is interesting when it is known in the American vernacular. I don't think it's well known in British. I've just always known it as a slightly old-fashioned, demure way of describing a relationship between an elder and a younger person with a big age gap. So it's May, December.
Why can't we talk about it? If we're really as in love as we say we are, shouldn't I be able to talk about this with you?
If we're really as in love as we say we are.
But the title also has a sort of meaning in that the film is set in May, and May is sort of the bracketed month of a sort of inevitability around. It begins with Memorial Day celebration and ends with graduation. We're leading up to the graduation that marks the end, the penultimate end of the story, and a kind of panic, a kind of, anxiety that I think is being felt by Gracie and Joe, that is certainly compounded by Elizabeth's emergence and entry into their lives. But it's also just about the empty nest that's looming, and the fact that that house is going to be empty, and they're going to be empty with each other in it, and being forced to confront each other in ways they never had.
Since we're on the calendar, Sunday Bloody Sunday is your last film here. Wyatt on Schlessinger's film.
It's always been a favorite film of mine. It also deals with an older, younger relationship, but in triplicate, because it's an older woman and an older man who are both involved with a younger man, played by Murray Head. It's Glenda Jackson and Peter Finch. It's all set in London, contemporary London in 1970, I think. And it's about all these sort of sophisticates who are aware that the same young man is having a relationship with an older woman and an older man. They even share somewhat of a social circle, the two elder characters. And yet it's really hard on everybody, or on the older characters. The young one has all the freedom and the prerogative to come and go, and they're left with the desire to try to hang on, but try to pretend that that's not, that they're more mature than that, and they see that we live in a modern time. And at the very end, Murray Head character goes off to America to pursue sculpture. And finally, Glenda Jackson and Peter Finch meet at a park across the street from a mutual friend's house. And it was similar to what happens at the end of May, December, where the two people who've been facing off through the movie finally have a face-off in a park at the end. In this case, they haven't seen each other through the whole film, so you're building up an anticipation for that scene already. But it's also just a beautifully shot and constructed film.
Thanks so much for speaking to us about these films, introducing people to these films, and your own amazing new film that you have yourself. It's the movie of December.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Brian.
you.